Hello, everybody. We will be starting in about 5 to 10 seconds. Thank you for joining. All right, let's do this thing. So hello, viewers. Thank you for joining today's webinar on TAMS Technology Assessment Tool that just got launched on Tuesday, April 27th. I'm Peter Saltakis. I co-chair the TAMS Technology Committee with Caroline Mayer, and it's with great pleasure that I get to introduce today's speakers and our sponsors. Next slide there, you'll see we have Jeremy Jameson, Managing Director from Airshop RQ, and Valerie Fender, Regional Travel Manager for the Americas at Nurion. Hello, Jeremy. Hello, Valerie. Are you with us?
Yep, we're
Hey
here.
there, Peter. Yes. Good morning, everybody.
All right, let's get those videos going so we can see your beautiful faces. Hello, hello. All righty, so on to the next one. Let's talk about what we're going to be covering today on the agenda. Today, we'll be diving deeper into what is the TAMS Technology Assessment Tool? Why did we create it? Who is it for? How is it designed? What are its potential use cases? Where can you access it online? And so much more. But first, some quick housekeeping. This meeting is being recorded, so for those of you today, you can always revert back to it at a later time. It'll be posted online at tamstravel.org. And for the Q&As, so we have a Q&A box here on the Zoom. I presume everyone has done Zoom a few hundred times now in the last year, but just in case you haven't, click on the Q&A. You can type your questions in there. We'll be answering them throughout and also have the majority answered at the end with our speakers. So with that, before we get too far into it, I'm going to pause here and welcome Mike Daly for a word from our sponsor. So just a quick intro on Mike. Mike is the Vice President for Sales in North America at Serko. And today is brought to you by Zeno by Serko. So thank you, Mike, for joining us. Thank you for the sponsorship. Over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Greatly appreciated. Always great to collaborate with you and the team. And I really can't thank you enough for this opportunity to sponsor this project, but TAMS overall. I mean, I'm truly excited about everything we're doing here at TAMS, especially this assessment tool, which is so timely and relevant. And remember, there was a survey, I think it was about a month ago, where almost half of travel managers said innovation is one of their 3 greatest pain points, with richness of data and a consistent user experience across multiple devices being the other 2. But as we start to think about the challenges that travel buyers are facing, they're really challenged to find that balance between giving travelers what they want and need, but also maintaining control of their programs, managing suppliers, and then of course, you know, the super intense focus on duty of care that we have now and probably moving forward for the foreseeable future. And when we think about what travelers are going through, they're typically frustrated with current technologies, namely booking tools. They lack consumer look and feel. That dissatisfaction typically extends to the broader travel program and creates, in many cases, leakage or rogue spend, whatever you want to call it. That's where Zeno comes in. And Zeno is Serko's next generation platform to help companies manage both travel and expense across every phase of the journey. We designed Zeno for travelers and arrangers who expect their business tools to be easy, to be simple, and to look and feel like consumer applications that we use every day. Now we deliver that with what we call a multi-source engine, as well as component architecture. So customers can pick and choose what type of content and which components they want to deploy and to whom. We take that and we combine that with artificial intelligence, predictive workflows to personalize that experience. So you still get access to all the preferred suppliers in your marketplace, but we do so in an ecosystem that really takes managing travel to a different level. So in the rush to return to normal, use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to. Right? I've always said the best time to repair a roof is when the sun is shining. So metaphorically speaking, the sun is shining right now, but travel is already coming back. So take advantage of this assessment tool. Assess your tech portfolio, before things get really crazy again. Why not address your pain points? Duty of care, leakage, NDC. Do you really want to go back to the same old tools with all the same old shortcomings? Change the game, be modern, be innovative. And now over to my friend Valerie Fender. But remember, may the fourth be with you always.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you,
And
guys.
thanks everyone for joining. I'm Valerie Fender. I'm very happy to be here talking about this innovation. So what we're looking at here is the actual link. This is where you're going to go to download the tool. So if you haven't done that already, let's do it. Not right now, but so can we go to the next slide? Okay, so just a little background on how this came to be, why we did this, why this was needed. We really wanted to have a mechanism for travel managers, travel buyers to do a holistic look at their technology, all of the tools that they're using. I know that as a travel manager myself, I find myself often spending a huge amount of time putting out fires, and often spending a lot of time with a situation in a region that it might not be all that important. So this tool gives us a way to really get a really good look at the whole program in terms of all the technology tools that we're using, and to compare the usefulness of these tools across all of our regions, make sure that we're really aligned to industry best practices, and come up with a plan to optimize and improve our program. So next slide. So we want to give some thanks to our advisors. This was kind of a long journey. It started back in September. Louise Miller of Eureka Consulting was there from the beginning, every step advising us. Caroline, who is the founder and principal at Get Travel Solutions, she is also the chair of the technology committee for TAMS. And you know Peter from FCM Travel, co-chair of technology. And we also have Matt Damaris to thank, also of FCM Travel, and part of the R&D subcommittee which worked on this project. So what we're seeing here is all of the various categories that will be evaluated in the assessment tool. There is a total of 15 categories. These categories all relate to particular types of the objectives of particular technology tools that you may be using. You'll later see how you're going to set the relevance of these categories. In your program, you may not be responsible for expense or payment solutions at all. And in that case, you would be able to categorize them as having no relevance. These categories are also in line with another project that is getting ready to be launched, which is the navigating the travel technology ecosystem. This is a interactive online map that will provide all kinds of suppliers in these various areas. So if the assessment, uncovers some gaps, it'll help you, find the right vendor. If we can go to the next tool. Okay, so there are actually two different approaches that one can take when doing the assessment. And this came, we have a light, sort of high level snapshot of your program, or the more comprehensive. This suggestion came from our pilot group. There was some concern about the amount of time and resources that would have to go into the comprehensive option, but still, wanted to be able to get a good snapshot relatively quickly. So with the light version, there are a total of 30 questions, 30 what we determined to be the most important questions over 10 of the categories. And then the comprehensive is up to 172 questions, depending on what you set as relevant. And it would require some more preparation. You'll probably need to have conversations with your internal IT department, possibly some suppliers, to get ready for that. Now, if you opt to do the light, you can certainly continue later and do the comprehensive. You don't have to answer those questions over again. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay. Now the assessment tool, as I mentioned, is completely customizable to your program. You're going to define your what we call geos or regions. These can be countries, they can be regions, they could even be business units. It's completely up to you. Your various regions may have different volumes, and your the weighting of the assessment can be based on that. Which region is more important, where you have the most business, where you have the most employees or traveling employees. And then it allows you to assign the same weighting for a separate geo or a different weighting. Jeremy's going to get into more of this with the demo, but again, completely flexible for your program. So you want to go to the next slide? Okay, so now I'm going to introduce Jeremy Jameson, who is the man with the skills, who's going to do the demo for you.
Thank you so much, Valerie, and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. So I'm going to walk you through the tool as it appears when you first download it, and then I have another version of the assessment which I've completed with some scoring so that we can look to see how it produces the charts and graphs, and I'll help you understand how you can interpret the results. So let's dig in. So when you first download the tool, it looks like this. It will, as you see, it's an Excel, and we chose Excel so that then it can be easily shared by travel managers across regions, so that you can collaboratively input the scores, as Valerie said, by geography or by business unit, and then you can have a holistic roll-up. So as you download the tool, it opens up to our instructions page, which explains the categories, explains a little bit what we mean by geos and the flexibility that's involved there. So as you download the tool, there are a few pre-filled geos, and then you'll choose which countries or business units or continents to fill in. The instructions then explain how you go about inputting data to drive the scores. We explain the high level versus the comprehensive assessment, and then we explain how you can see the results on the scoring summary, and a little bit about how to interpret the results. So I'm going to kind of walk you through this process here and explain how this works. So the first thing that you would do after you download the tool is you're going to set your priorities by category. So for example, as Valerie said, let's say that you're not responsible for expense within your program. So you would have the ability to say that is not relevant to scoring, and you can set it as a 0. As Mike was saying, duty of care is extremely important right now. So we might say, I want for any assessment items that deal with duty of care to have extreme importance in the overall scoring. So that's how we set our priorities. The next thing that we do after we download the tool is define our geos. When you download it, we have a few examples of geos set up by continents, but you have the total flexibility to either set up countries or groupings of countries or regions or business units. And then you're going to set the priorities or the volume, if you will, of travel that you have originating out of that geo. So in this, when you download it, it has an example of North America. Maybe that is among your very largest markets. So you would put in a sizing factor of 5. And then let's say that Latin America is among your smaller markets. So you might put in a sizing factor of 2. The reason that we do the sizing is so that then when we get our overall scores for the global travel program, it's going to take into account how big each geo is in determining what weighting to attribute in the final score. So now we're done with the setup, and we can begin actually providing data for our first geo. So let me kind of walk you through this. So this is where we input our relevance as well as our performance score. And for our Geo 1, we have the ability to say that we want to pre-fill the other geos with the relevance and performance score which we assigned here. And so we might do that if we have a technology that is used across my global travel program. I could change an assessment item to say, you know what, I want for this particular item to be the same worldwide. Or let's say that I happened to have the same technology that I use in North America. I also use it within Europe. And so I can say that this same scoring applies to Europe. So that's how that works. Here within, and we highlight, I'll say, the yellow boxes are always the boxes where you have inputs that we're needing you to provide in order to get to the scores. So we have organized the assessment items by category, and then you have a subcategory to kind of give you a little bit of context as to what the question is going to be about. You then have what we call the assessment item, your relevance, and then your performance score. Now the performance score, there are 2 types. Some of them are true-false questions, and others are 0 to 3, where 0 is, you do not meet kind of the description of the item that's being described. 1 would be you meet some of the requirements that we're describing there. 2, meeting all of the requirements. And then 3, you go beyond what are the requirements that are being asked for in a particular item. So as you see, we open up the assessment tool, and it will have for our Geo 1 our high-level assessment. So that would be our first 30 questions. And it goes through 10 categories. And then once we've completed our high-level assessment, we then go into the questions for the comprehensive assessment. And you do not need to answer the same questions again. The tool does computations of the information that was gathered from the high level and will carry it through into the comprehensive. One other thing I'll say is that the categories are organized alphabetically. So if you later need to go back and check to see what was going on with a category within a geo, you can always find that pretty easily just by alphabetical order. So the next thing is the scoring summary. When you first download the tool, we're going to have zeros here because we haven't provided any data just yet. So the tool opens up to the high level compilation, and then it goes into the comprehensive results, and then we get some additional detail. And I'll have some sample data that we can look at here in just a second. And at this point, we're done with our first geo, and we could then provide data to assess what's going on in Geo 2, Geo 3, Geo 4, and so on. So that's the tool. Let's now switch over to some sample data so that we can take a look at how we would interpret the results. So in this case, we see now we have some data. What I've done is I've prioritized my categories. And I've said that some are extremely important. Others maybe a little bit less important. By default, we had configured everything to be moderately important. And then for my geos, I've inputted 20 here, and I've prioritized them based on volume. And for our demo today, we're just going to look at 3 countries. So Geo 1, 2, and 3, in which case for this demo, I've said that I have a lot of travel originating out of the United States. Germany is a large market for travel as well. And I'm highlighting Argentina here to kind of show how the weighting works. So although Argentina would be a smaller market, maybe we're wanting to assess it first. Maybe we know within our company that there's about to be a whole lot more volume originating out of Argentina. And so we wanted, for example, to prioritize scoring it. So we have 3 markets of different sizes. And then let's look at our Geo 1. So it's questions that dig into things like business intelligence tools. How do we have our connectivity out to our suppliers and service providers? It looks at direct connect, duty of care, our online booking tool, and so on. And so I've inputted here scores for the United States, as well as for my Geo 2 and Geo 3, in this case, Germany and Argentina. And in this demo, each of these geos have differing technologies that have been implemented across these 15 categories. That is to demonstrate that you might have different products in use in each of your travel program countries. So in the case of the United States, doing the high-level assessment and direct connect, we answered 3 questions, a couple that deal with queues, one that deals with APIs for the United States, and same for Germany, but have different products in use, so the answers were a little bit different. And then the same for Argentina. Again, same questions, but maybe different products, and therefore our answers were a little different. So let's look at the scoring summary. So the first thing that we see is our high-level assessment results. And we can see that globally, summing everything up on an unadjusted basis, we have our overall score here. On an adjusted basis, which means to account for the fact that the US has a lot more volume, therefore its weighting, taking that into account, our overall score goes a bit higher. And then when we take into account the priority of our categories, we can see that our overall score goes even higher. That means that we're performing well in the categories that are most strategic to our program. Then down here, we can see by geo what was its high-level score on an unadjusted basis. And we can see that actually the US market in this case is really doing well in terms of best practices. Germany doing well as well. And then we probably have some issues that we're going to want to work on in Argentina with that team in order to get them ready for this ramp up that we're expecting in more traffic. And then here we can see by category globally, with weighting by category and by geo, we can see by each of these 10 categories in the assessment how we're performing. And so we can see that for business intelligence tools, we're doing great. On the connection platform, looks like there's some issues. And on the direct connect, we can see that there is an even bigger delta between the points possible versus the points scored. And so that's interesting. So let's kind of learn how we would go about digging into that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to the detailed results for my high-level assessment. And so here we have our summary, and we can see that it's organized in the columns by the categories that are being assessed. So for Direct Connect, since we wanted to dig into that, we can see that the US actually scored okay, not perfect, Germany as well, but we can see that Argentina did not meet any of the best practices that we were looking at for Direct Connect. So that's interesting. What we would then do is we would go to that geo to find out, okay, what is it that's driving down Argentina's score for this assessment category. So we can go to Geo 3, and we would look in Direct Connect, and we can see that indeed, for our 3 questions that deal with Direct Connect, Argentina scored a false on 2 of them, and then on the numeric question that deals with Direct Connect, it did not meet the requirements. So that tells us that, yeah, we would want to work with the travel program leadership in Argentina to help them move along in their capabilities with the Direct Connect technologies that they're using there. Now let's take a look at the comprehensive assessment. And the comprehensive assessment summary comes in right below our high-level summary on our scoring summary page. And as Valerie was explaining, we have a full 15 categories that are being scored in the comprehensive assessment. We can see that with all the additional questions that come into place with the comprehensive assessment, our overall global unadjusted score is at 68%. So there are maybe some issues that the comprehensive assessment detected that were not a part of the high-level assessment. But we can see we're doing fairly well when we weight by geo. But now we can see that the categories coming into its weighting, there are probably some issues that we're going to want to dig into. Our comprehensive results kind of follow what we had seen for the high level. Again, we're seeing that the U.S. is very good, in good shape in terms of the way that its products are meeting best practices. We see here in this example that Argentina had some problems with its scoring, however. When we look then at the 15 categories, we can see that perhaps the biggest delta between the green bar, which is the total points possible, and the purple bar, which is the number of points we received, perhaps the biggest delta from our comprehensive assessment is happening with this category that's called Traveler on-Trip Communications. So it's looking at how that is configured across each of our geographies. So let's dig in to see what's happening with the comprehensive assessment and our Traveler on-Trip Communications. So we'll scroll down and we get to now our comprehensive assessment results. And because we have 15 categories, we have more columns that we're dealing with here. Let's freeze the panes there, and let's go all the way out to what's happening with Traveler on Trip. And we see that in this case, Germany is actually our highest scoring region, our highest scoring geo. The US, though, appears to be having some issues in the way that its products are configured. And then again, we have some work to do in Argentina. So, good to know. Now what we would do is we would dig into Geo 1 to see what's going on with Traveler on Trip, and Geo 3 to see what's going on in Argentina for the same. So as I mentioned, our categories are organized by, or sorted alphabetically, so we can scroll down Geo 1's results. We come into our comprehensive assessment, and we'll go to the bottom. That's where our Traveler on Trips questions came in. And we can see that for 3 of the assessment items, the U.S. market was not able to say that it's meeting the best practice. So for example, one of the assessment items was, does the risk management system enable direct communication between the travel manager and the traveler? In this case, the U.S. program it responded false, that no, we don't have that capability. And then also we can see that the system is not able to send notifications when travelers' express benchmarks are being met. And we can see also that our product that we have in place there does not enable active mobile tracking. So those would be things that we want to maybe put on our roadmap, to have dialogue with our suppliers about. And so these are great kind of ideas for now how we can move our program towards best practices. The other one that we wanted to look at was Argentina. So in that case, again, we will come down to our comprehensive results. And then our T category is at the bottom, so traveler on trip communications. And we can see that in this case, all of the assessment items for traveler on trip, the respondent for Argentina said that on all of them except for one, they do not have the capability within the products that they're currently using. So in this case, we can see that the only one that they're able to fulfill is that they do provide the employees in Argentina with advice around cybersecurity. So that would tell us that we need to be working with our leadership in Argentina to help them move this forward. So that's a bit about the tool. As you can see, fairly straightforward. The other thing that I will mention is that if you do come into individual assessment items that are not relevant within your program, you can turn them off. And so we could say that in the case of expense, for example, let's say that we do not have responsibility for expense-related issues within the travel program. So on a question-by-question basis, furthermore, we could say that this particular question does not apply. And when we set the relevance of an assessment item question to 0, that means that it's not going to be computed in terms of possible scores or even scores provided. So that kind of blocks out the assessment item from being computed into your final scoring summary. So that's the tool. Again, you can download it and configure it with your priorities, and then you get started with your GEO1. To complete the high-level assessment, just 30 questions, and I would expect that once you've kind of set up your priorities, you could complete those 30 questions in about 30 minutes. And so you'll have the graphs for your high-level assessment of your first GEO in just a half an hour, and that'll give you a great idea of what the tool can do to measure how each of these categories are performing in terms of your program and moving towards best practices. So I'm going to switch us back over to our PowerPoint. And let's switch over for Q&A.
All righty. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Jeremy. That was most insightful. And we have gotten some pretty good feedback here from the audience. So I'm going to go down a few of these here. And whichever of you want to grab this, I'm going to throw it up as a jump ball. Grab it and run with it for the answer. So 2 questions actually had a similar theme about benchmarking. What is potentially a future state of being able to take the responses from users and TAMS potentially being able to offer some sort of baseline benchmarking in order to indicate industry averages, as well as potentially what is a best practice target metric?
Yeah, so we absolutely did talk about that during the course of the project design. The tool, as it is now configured, the results are your results. We do not have any visibility to the way that you're scoring this because it's an Excel workbook that you then run within your own environment. But we did talk about how it would be interesting to be able to share benchmarks among users who have gone through the assessment. And so if you're willing to share the results that you got, please do send them in. That would be very helpful. You can provide either high-level numbers or even better yet would be the full spreadsheet. The place to send that to would be technology@tamstravel.org. Absolutely, we would love to do cross-user benchmarking in a future version of this tool. So if you're willing to share data, please do send that in, and we'll continue to kind of think about how we can further automate that for future versions of the tool.
Super, thank you. So let's think here. Another one that came in. So how did you define or determine what met the criteria to go in the light version versus the full version? What made the cut? What didn't make the cut?
So that was a collaborative effort. So the full set of questions was first identified across a number of people within the TAMS organization. The technology committee certainly contributed heavily into determining which questions would go into this tool, but also we collaborated with other committees across TAMS to get their input as to what are the important technology assessment items to include. As Valerie was explaining, our pilot with actual corporate travel managers and buyers showed that it would be nice if there were a way to get a result more quickly than going through the full comprehensive assessment, which is what drove us to do the high level version. The way then that we got to the high level version was it was very democratic actually. We had a voting process on question by question, and our team members were able to vote on how important this particular item would be to either preparing a corporate travel buyer to have more advanced conversation and dialogue with their suppliers, or how important would this particular assessment item be to a corporate travel manager who's really wanting to move their program towards a best-in-class technology configuration. So that's what we had in mind as we did the prioritization, and we simply then took a computation of what all of our team members' scores were for those kind of attributes against all the assessment items, and that's how we were able to generate then our top 30 most important questions.
Super, thank you. So maybe this is a question for Valerie here, getting a buyer's perspective. I'm a buyer, and let's say I'm going to market this year. I'm working on my RFP, I'm working on my questions, I'm potentially looking at a consulting company I want to contract with to help support the initiative. But where do you see something like this tool, this assessment, fitting into the mix? Is this something I ought to do independently before I even get to that stage? Is that something that I ought to encourage them to potentially look at as a resource as part of my evaluation? What would you do? And Valerie, I think you're on mute there. One sec. And oh, still muted. It's on the Zoom.
Sorry.
There we go.
Okay.
No worries.
I would start with the assessment. That would be my opinion, because I think that's kind of how it was designed. It's for us to wrap our heads around where we have gaps and where we're pretty strong. And so to kind of feel like I'm approaching this RFI or this RFP in a more educated place, I would start with the assessment. I also think, I mean, I'm not really answering your question, but if you are new to an organization and you've just been brought on as a travel manager or moved into the role from another department, this would be very, very useful. You're not going to get it done in 30 minutes, that's for sure, but to wrap your head around what's going on in this company and what needs to be done. But definitely, I think this was put together so that you could do it yourself. You don't need to bring in outside resources. You can decide on a consulting company to help you with an RFP or implementations after you get your snapshot.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Valerie. So we have about 5 more minutes. So we have about 4 more minutes left for questions. So I'm going to try to get through a few more of these. Let's take a look here. Let's say you do the high level, shorter assessment. can you add questions from the comprehensive set of questions, the full version, to the short version?
So absolutely, yes. So you can choose which categories you want to begin with in the comprehensive assessment. So for example, let's say you did go ahead and you completed your 30 questions for the high level, and then you were intrigued by what's going on with duty of care, and so you wanted to answer those specific questions for duty of care within the comprehensive assessment. The tool knows that you've only addressed the comprehensive questions within that one category for duty of care, so it's only going to count the points for that particular category. The way that the tool works is, as soon as you have answered at least one question within a category, the points then are scored for that entire category. So once you do begin a category, it makes sense to answer all the questions within that category, but certainly you can just do one category at a time, and the scoring will follow you as you move from completing one category to then beginning the next.
Very good, very good. Two more questions and we'll wrap things up. Let's see, I think you hit maybe half of this earlier, but let's reiterate and then get to the part two that you didn't get to. So from where did the assessment questions originate, as well as the best practices, response measures? Are these agreed industry standards, and how do we keep them relevant as the industry and market remains dynamic, especially in today's current environment? Great question.
You want to take that one, Valerie?
Yeah, well, that was that iteration of the project was probably the most time consuming, because we took it out to not just the technology committee, but the broader TAMS community in general for their input on what should be evaluated in terms of the technology used in a travel program. Wow, there was a lot to get through, because we had to sort of consolidate it, same ideas, just different words, and we had to turn them all into scorable statements. It was going down the road of looking like an RFI for a while, and we had to kind of rein it in and turn it into an actual assessment. But the population of people who are contributing to TAMS is pretty impressive, and it goes across buyers and suppliers and consultants, and so we really did feel like we had a good that we're really not missing much. It's a good content.
Yeah, and then in terms of keeping the questions kind of relevant as these technologies and each of these categories evolve, certainly we can roll out new versions of the assessment as we progress.
Great, that's great. I think that hit it dead on there. So thank you very much. And on that note, that's really all we have time for, actually. So I'm going to bite my tongue on that last question. But before I close things off with everyone, please take a look at your chat right now. I just sent through the link, of course. You can also find all this information with TAMS, as you can see on the visual here. There's the TAMS Travel website. You can find us on social. If you want to reach the technology committee, that's technology@tamstravel.org. And as you'll see in the chat, the assessment can be found directly at tamstravel.org/assessment. Just gave you the email there. And of course, this has been recorded. It's currently being recorded, and it will be posted at tamstravel.org/webinars. So that is a wrap. Thank you very much for attending. And please be sure to check out our next project that is getting launched late this month with a webinar following in early June. More information on navigating the open technology ecosystem in a few weeks. But on that, once more, thank you again, Valerie. Thank you again, Jeremy. Thank you as well to our sponsor, Mike Daly and Zeno by Serko. Stay tuned. A lot more great stuff coming from TAMS Technology. Stay safe. Take care. See you on the road soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.